Ex-racist people of Reddit, what changed your views? Learning about people by talking to them instead of listening to what my family had to say about them. Exposure is deadly to prejudice most of the time. As a lurker, this is a thread I can contribute to. From birth I was raised to be racist in a racist household, VA. I was ignorant. I used the N-word, anti-Semitic, homophobic, racist language every day. My immediate family and extended family all share the same ignorance. At family gatherings, if one of my older cousins let slip they were dating someone new, the first question would be, is he white? Followed by laughter, but the question was serious. Then I started middle school. 6th grade. On the first day of class 1 set down my backpack against the classroom wall, like every other student, while we found our desks and had a small meet and greet with new classmates. I made sure to only speak to the kids, white, whom I knew from elementary school. Our teacher told us to take our seats. I'm 42 years old and I remember this like it was yesterday. I picked up my backpack, found my desk. Before I could open my bag, the girl behind me told me she liked my earrings. Her mom wouldn't let her get her ears pierced until high school. Then I heard another voice from further behind me say, Ms. K, this isn't my backpack. The backpack sitting on this girl's desk was identical to the one sitting next to my desk. We both opened our backpacks and realized we'd grabbed the wrong bag. Internally I rolled my eyes in disgust. This girl was a N. But I was taught to never let it show. So we met each other to quickly exchange. Her smile was beautiful. She wore glasses the same shape as mine. She wore her hair in a ponytail, just like mine. In our back-to-school shopping we picked the exact same backpack and we picked the exact same Nikes, pink, white. Her name was Jacinda. I found myself genuinely smiling back to her, and giggling like young girls do. That day she asked to sit together during lunch, and we sat beside each other for lunch every single day of middle school. She was my very first best friend. Jacinda taught me about her Sunday school classes. My family never attended church. We talked about everything important in the life of middle school girls. She wasn't allowed to attend my birthday parties, and I wasn't allowed to go to hers, but we always celebrated together at school. I loved her so much. When it was time to go to high school I continued in public school and her parents chose to homeschool her. I thought homeschooling was the coolest idea. Jacinda is brilliantly intelligent. God, she was going to do great things for this world. Long before the age of social media, we lost touch sadly, but I still think of her often. After meeting Jacinda I never used another racist or derogatory word. Meeting Jacinda changed my life for the better. I hope one day you and Jacinda are able to reconnect. Not me, but my best friend's parents. They told her not to touch me because she would get my skin disease. I'm a brownie and at the time we met I was 12. They didn't want us to be friends, but I would always be kind and polite to them, full well knowing how they felt about my skin color. One year my friend, at this point best friend, was having a sleepover birthday party and her parents said I could come, but couldn't sleep over. My friend cancelled her party and her parents must have felt like complete shit because they started to talk to me more and more after that. We have been best friends for almost 30 years now. Her parents came to my wedding. They send me a Christmas card every year. They call me and ask how I'm doing, and they invite me to their get-togethers. I'm glad they came around and I'm proud of them. Your best friend is a champ. My dad was racist. I was raised in a toxic environment and I guess some of his ideologies rubbed off on me. He was also violent when alcohol was involved, which was a lot of the time. Police would often arrest him to just get him in a cell for the night for being disorderly. On one occasion, the police turned up. One of them came into my room and sat with me as they dealt with my dad. He asked how I was, who I could talk to, etc. He was from a South Asian background. He was very kind to me and did his best in calming me down and giving me advice on dealing with this stuff. I was only about 15 at the time. As they were pulling my dad out, that same police officer was attacked by my dad after breaking free from another officer, breaking the officer's finger in the process, whilst also hurling verbal, racial abuse at him. It wasn't long after the London bombings, so you can imagine what was said. My dad was also an electrician in Russell Square at the time, close to one of the blasts. The officer didn't react, probably knowing I was watching the commotion from my room or the fact he was a decent human being. My dad was convicted of multiple offenses against a police officer as well as a hate crime. The only silver lining was as my dad was being sentenced, the prosecutor was a black man who casually read out the testimony of the arresting officer of what my dad said that night. The prosecutor could barely keep a straight face, watching my dad hold his head in shame, dressed in plastic overalls because he thought stuffing his clothes down the toilet of his jail cell and flooding the place would be funny. He got community service, probation, and was required to attend rehab. He relapsed a few years ago and can barely walk or talk because of multiple strokes from continued alcohol dependency. The people responsible for protecting me from my dad were people of color. That sure as hell changes your perspective on things even if you have the slightest ignorance towards another race. Edit. Typo TLDR. Dad was a violent racist dressed in prison overalls, sentenced by educated black guy in suit. Brother was racist. We both love science fiction. One time he was talking about all the cool races in the Star Wars and Star Trek and Mass Effect universes. How creative Lucas and Roddenberry were. He talked about how great it would be to be among those races as a human and acquaint yourself with alien cultures and people and mythology. I said, you can't even mingle with the other races on your home planet. Maybe it was the weed, but what I said had some effect on him. He's very noticeably more tolerant and curious about other people's now. I think he realized that his previous philosophies were not in line with those of the Federation. Good for him. This is the one I love most in the thread. Such a simple truth you pointed out to him, and so effective. He was probably like, inside his head when you said that because it was one of those, wow. There. Not wrong moments. I didn't realize I was racist and being raised in a racist household until 4th grade. I was in a group project having to give a presentation to the class. My group was me and 2 black girls. My parents hated black women. Black people in general, but especially black women. As they both watch tennis, you can guess all the shit they said about the Williams sisters. Meanwhile, there I was standing there watching my group mates talk. They were just as good, if not better than me, at talking in the class. Or understanding the material. Or anything really. I can still see that moment where the class fades away in my mind and one of my group mates is talking to the class where I realize a fundamental truth: my parents were wrong. It still makes me sad thinking about stuff I remember saying as a kid, regurgitating things I heard my parents or relatives say. But in my experience, as I have gotten older, is that the number one way to combat racism is to bring people into the same room. When people have shared experiences, that sense of otherness fades away. Of course, in 2021 and the internet bring what it is, it's really easy for people to hide in their own corners of the internet. But I'm thankful for that experience in 4th grade. I got in trouble a lot over the years for getting mad when family would throw around the N word or lock the doors when they saw black people. But I knew I was right. And in the decades that have passed, nothing has tarnished or taken away that childhood lesson. My parents are wrong is a tough but necessary lesson to learn. My dad would make disparaging remarks about black people, Mexicans, Chinese people, etc. When I was a kid, I remember repeating those same sentiments and no one ever corrected me. In 1st grade, we were all assigned pen pals from a school in another city and mine was a black girl named Chardonnay. I thought she had a weird name and I was disappointed when I found out she wasn't white. Very soon after that, we learned some very basic info about the civil rights movement during Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, separate water fountains, segregated schools, stuff like that. After that, I felt really bad about being racist and wanting a different pen pal, and really ashamed of my dad and grandparents for thinking that way. And I was so mad that they taught me to think that way. After that, I was really happy to have the opportunity to write to my pen pal and get to know her better. I'm so thankful that my school started teaching us about racism early on. It's scary to think how I could have ended up if those sentiments had gone unchecked. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect Chardonnay to be a nice white carrot. Sorry carrot, I carrot had carrot too. Not me, but my grandpa told me that when he was young he was a bit racist, due to his a whole alcoholic dad being really racist and teaching him to treat others of different races like trash. He told me this stopped though when he was around 13 when his dad left. He realized how stupid it was to judge others based on race, and I'm glad he realized how stupid it was since he's a really sweet guy now. This is sorta like my dad. I don't mean to make excuses for him, but my grandfather, Popper I called him, grew up in rural ND and didn't see a black man until he was in his late 20s. He had been exposed to the words of other racists, and never heard anything opposing those thoughts, and never saw another black man where he could form his own opinion. When my dad was growing up, they were watching football and my dad asked why there weren't any black quarterbacks, and my papa said, because they're too stupid to be quarterback. They literally just don't have enough brain cells. My dad lived with that information for a very long time, with that outlook, until he joined the Air Force and finally met black people who completely changed his opinion. It helps that my father is an extremely intelligent and widely open-minded person. I don't think many other people would be able to work themselves out of thoughts like that which they've grown their entire lives with. My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything, though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid, and discovered she still loved him. She made astounding late-life progress accepting that darker skin-toned people were not only people, but family, friends and welcome in her house. My grandmother, may she rot in hell, was born in 1900 and met her first non-white great-grandchild in the mid-80s, my niece. Told my sister to get that N*** out of my house. Never spoke to her again. She died later that year. Country bumpkins in Pennsylvania could have been easily mistaken for someone below the Mason-Dixon line. Edited for clarity, great-grandchild. A guy I worked with said he was neo-Nazi as a teenager, and ended up in prison somehow. He hated Jews for some reason, and blacks. He was never clear on why, just that he had so much hatred in his heart, and that was his outlet. He was in prison for many years. I think he almost killed somebody by beating him up. So, many years later and in prison there was a mentor-type staff there, and this one lady was so helpful to him, and she cared about him so much that it really started to get into his head the idea of being a positive person. Then, he learned that she was Jewish, and he said he couldn't believe she was so kind and caring despite the fact he was a claimed neo-Nazi. From that day he swore to be a better person. He learned his lesson. He's a pretty great guy these days, doing his family thing and making sure his son grows up with lots of love and all that he didn't have. Really remarkable. Great guy. At first I thought you were just typing out the plot of American History X. Man, I don't even know where to start with this one. I grew up in the middle of fucking nowhere, Mississippi, where the slave trade was referred to as the Great African Migration in our history books. Every person of color was referred to by the N-word as just the default. It wasn't until I moved the fuck out of the South that I began to comprehend what racism was. I wish I could say I had a moment of clarity that washed away all the racist bullshit that I'd grown up with, but it was more like a couple decades worth of mental deprogramming I had to fight against. There was so much underlying hate of different people that warped how my view of the world was. The Great African Migration just buried that particular bit of history under a fucking mountain of sugar. WTF? I was a nice white racist. I think a big part of it was that I grew up in a very white town. So the only information I got about other cultures was from TV and other media. I never said a racial slur and never thought of myself as racist. I was perfectly nice to anybody I met. But I would definitely hold my purse a little closer if a black or Latino man was passing me. I believed cliches about other races. I generally thought of the POC folks I met as the exceptions to the cliches about their people. Then I started seriously dating an Asian man. I'd never dated a non-white person before. I was shocked by how frequently we had people give us double takes when holding hands in public. We were on a road trip and stopped by Walmart for some snacks. It was the first time I've really felt unsafe. People were glaring at us simply because we were a mixed-race couple. We split up in that Walmart for safety. I asked him if that's how he always felt in small towns, and he laughed and said that how he always felt in the town I had grown up in too. It was a medium-sized college town. That was my big wake-up call. I started analyzing my thinking. I started catching myself thinking in stereotypes. I started noticing when I was being racist and started trying harder to be less racist. I'm not perfect. I'm still a little awkward around black people. I still catch myself thinking racist thoughts, but I think I'm better than I was a few years ago. ETA, I married the Asian boyfriend. If you marry Marry the person who helps you be the best version of yourself. Greater than I never said a racial slur and never thought of myself as racist. I was perfectly nice to anybody I met. But I would definitely hold my purse a little closer if a black or Latino man was passing me. I believed cliches about other races. I generally thought of the POC folks I met as the exceptions to the cliches about their people. It's actually shocking how many people in the United States consider themselves not racist, but still hold blatant preconceived racial biases like you're talking about here. That's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to convincing moderates, conservatives, or even many liberals that some of their actions are racist. They think that unless they're saying slurs or burning crosses, it just doesn't count as racism. It's incredibly frustrating because often they'll try to make minorities sound like the crazy ones by gaslighting and saying shit like, "That's not racism. People nowadays have never experienced real racism, like fuck me. Thank you for saying this and admitting it's a problem." I know this isn't the exact question, but I was raised in a strict military Republican household. Though my family wasn't racist, they were extremely homophobic and beloved women belong in the home and in their place. They would make fun of lesbians and gay men throughout my whole life, speak poorly of women working outside the home. When I was 18, I met a guy at my local coffee shop in a very red town, state. I couldn't decide if I wanted to date him or take him shopping and hang out. He was just super cool. We made plans and later ate hot wings and drank wine. I had never felt more myself than when I was with him. I had to forgot any financial adult backing in college because my new lifestyle didn't meet my family's ideas. This was absolutely okay with me and I charged through challenge happily while accumulating debt. Turns out he ran away from his home and was cut off from his family for being gay. He became my roommate for more than 9 years and my best friend in the world. And my roommate, I always had a place for him to stay in my own home and he always seemed to move right in the most natural way possible. Literally, he just was always there in my home through every stage of life for a decade. He introduced me to the gay community and as a female, instead of getting harassed at a club, I could go out dancing with him and have a blast and be safe all night. He became my family and closest confidant over the years. My family didn't take kindly to this friendship, nor did they like that I became a business owner. They no longer speak to me and I am so happy to be the black sheep. Anyway, I'm so glad I met him, and he changed my life. I would have been comfortable in my conservative bubble and probably never questioned my views. His friendship made me open my eyes to not only the world of possibilities but also my own views of what I was raised with. He challenged me and made me a better person and I'll always be grateful for the absolute gift he gave me. Because I was now a safe person with views different than what my small town was used to, I became a safe friend for people to come out to. And my God, it's been the honor of my life to grow, find acceptance, and apply acceptance blindly. My child, a woman, making a better life for herself by starting a business? Blasphemy. I don't understand people. Edit. Thanks for the award, though I'm not sure what it means exactly. I moved away from my one-horse hometown and got away from my extremely prejudiced family. I didn't even live in a one-horse town. My hometown had one of the fastest growing zip codes in the country at one point before I left for college. However, the religious environment I grew up in, more the Catholic, Christian aspect of it, my religious upbringing is stupidly complex, was very racist, and homophobic. Of course, I feel like those always go hand in hand. My father told me that the Bible says you shouldn't date outside your race, and that I would never date or marry a black or Hispanic man because he didn't want his bloodline mixing with theirs. Don't worry, this wasn't his thoughts, he talked to God and God told him this. Joke's on him, after dating a bunch of loser, just so happened to be white, guys, I was set up on a blind date with a man who happens to be Hispanic. That was 5 years, 5 pets, and a house purchase ago, and we're getting engaged any day now. I had to go through a journey to becoming a decent person before that, but it started pretty immediately after I went to college and started making friends that didn't have to be approved by my parents. Turns out all of the people my parents hate are actually really fucking nice and supportive people once you treat them as humans. Meanwhile, all of the respect and courtesy in the world won't make my parents unless themselves. I never made the choice really to be racist, but I grew up in South Mississippi and my family wasn't overtly racist, but they were the kind to say racist things behind closed doors and didn't allow us to watch TV shows such as The Cosby Show or Fresh Prince, and definitely no rap music in the house. I absolutely fell in love with a lot of black artists in the early 90s. I loved the hip-hop scene at the time, and holy shit, Fresh Prince was the best sitcom on television. I played football with 80% black guys and worked at Popeye's Chicken with over half the staff being black. I guess you can say my own real-world exposure, despite their attempt to shelter me, changed me. I cringe at some of the vernacular I used in my early youth, as the N-word was the same as black. In my house, I literally was not raised to know that was a bad word. I'm glad that from the age of maybe 12 on I learned to love all people on my own.
Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.